The podcast you are about to listen to is not a medical podcast, nor is it designed to diagnose a condition. While there are medical experts on this show, any questions regarding medical care or concern should be directed to a primary care physician.
The team at INVAX is dedicated to delivering new, personalized immunotherapy approaches to improve outcomes for people living with glioblastoma and other solid tumors. Leveraging decades of validated research and technologies, INVAX's unique platform is designed to capture a tumor's full antigen signature and use it to stimulate a patient's immune system against remaining tumor cells. INVAX, advancing a new approach to personalized cancer immunotherapy. Hey, it's your friend Shannon Trapphagen, and welcome to the Game on Glio podcast. Here we tell the stories of brain cancer and tumor warriors, clinicians, medical experts, and those in the grief and loss community. Thanks to all of you for making our podcast one of the most popular podcasts globally. If you enjoy our show, please consider writing a review. Also share us with a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and our website.
This season of the Game on Glio podcast is sponsored by GT MedTech and Gamatile Therapy. Learn more at gamatile.com. This season is also sponsored by INVAX, personalized, whole tumor-derived immunotherapy. Learn more at INVAX.com. This episode is sponsored by Plus Therapeutics, power and precision in radiotherapeutics. Learn more at respect-trials.com and plustherapeutics.com.
I don't know if I've ever talked about this before, but I remember the first time I went grocery shopping after Mike died. I think we were actually still planning the funeral. It took about 2 or 3 weeks before we actually had his funeral because of COVID. And within that 2 or 3 weeks, I went grocery shopping for the very first time. And when I say grocery shopping for the very first time, I mean I went grocery shopping for the very first time without him either with me or present in the household where I had to be mindful of his needs. It was a surreal experience. I don't think I anticipated how difficult it was going to be. One of my best friends was in town with her husband and the kids, trying to help out a little bit, supporting me. They were staying at the house. I said, I'm going to run to the store. I'm going to pick up some stuff so we can have dinner. I got to the store and I remember getting a cart and running in. I got 2 or 3 items that I put in the basket, in the cart. And I remember getting down an aisle and I went to go grab an item because it was something Mike wanted. It was something he typically ate. And I went to go throw it in the cart and then realized I don't need this anymore. I don't need to get this for him. It was in that moment that my anxiety just went through the roof. I started wandering around the grocery store because I didn't know what to get anymore, because I wasn't getting anything for him. I didn't have to grocery shop for him. I didn't need to get items that he and I would need together or would eat together. I didn't need to get things that he would like. I panicked. I am not kidding when I say I panicked. And I stood in an aisle, like the toiletry aisle, because it was empty and there weren't a lot of people in that aisle at that moment. And it's a big grocery store. And I just stood there and I was sobbing. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I quickly gathered a few things that I knew my friends wanted and raced out of the grocery store. And I just sat in the car because it hit me. It hit me in that moment that after nearly 20 years of shopping for 2 of us, getting things that I knew we both needed and liked, I no longer was going to do that. To put into words how that felt in that moment. And what's interesting is I was reflecting on this memory and on this feeling going into this episode. And I was at the grocery store not too long ago and thinking about it and realizing, wow, how far I've come. I'm at the grocery store. I've gotten into a new routine. I know the items that I need for myself. I know what I need to get for me. I know what I need to keep me healthy and what I want for food that week. It was one of those moments where I was able to reflect back and look at the last 4.5 years and remember how hard it was. Those first handful of grocery shopping trips after he died were some of the biggest hurdles for me. It was an obstacle just to go to the grocery store. And now it's second nature again. Only now I'm doing it for one person. And so I was thinking about how the pain hasn't really gone away, but it's dulled. It's softened. I'm changing yet again and growing into this new version of who I am as a widow, as somebody who is no longer married. Although there are moments where I still feel married, but he is no longer here. And everything that I am doing now, I do for me. And while some people might revel in that, they might love that. And for those who are single and haven't gone through a death, they may say, oh my God, it's the greatest feeling in the world. It's so freeing to just think about yourself and nobody else. And you don't have to consider somebody else's food patterns or thoughts or feelings. You're just doing it for you. I do not revel in that. I really don't. It's not me. I miss it. I miss having somebody to care for and think about and picking up their food items, what they want from the grocery store, cooking for them. But I have come a long way. And so I share this story with you to remind all of you that you will move through this. You will grow around the loss and the grief. And if I can do this, if I can come as far as I've come, you absolutely can too. And with that, I want to share that what I'm going to try to do in some of these episodes going forward from here out through the rest of the season, I decided I want to share some things with you guys. I want to be able to share some things that have made my life easier, and it's something that I've always loved, and that's cooking. Many of you know that I'm a big food person. I always have been. I had a food show long before I started a podcast and started doing media. And so what I'd like to try to do is share some recipes for all of you who are currently going through grief and loss, who are now down to one person, or where you are now a single parent with young kids. I'm going to try my hardest to share some really simple, healthy recipes that you can make very easily and very quickly. You will get those recipes at the tail end of the interview episode. So at the very end of the show, I will send some very quick recipes, and then we'll try to add those to the website so that you guys can come up with some really quick, easy meals and feel supported during your journey. After this break, we are going to sit down with our guest, Kelci Jager, grief coach and widow. We sit down and talk to her next, after a brief word from our sponsor. An estimated 25,000 cancerous brain tumors will be diagnosed in the U.S. in 2025. We understand that this diagnosis is life-altering, and finding the right treatment option is a deeply personal journey. GammaTile, an innovative solution for operable brain tumors, combines tumor removal surgery and radiation therapy in a single procedure. GammaTiles are small, bioresorbable collagen tiles embedded with radiation seeds placed at the time of surgery. GammaTile begins radiation treatment immediately, delivering targeted radiation continuously over several weeks. We recognize the strength and resilience of those impacted by a diagnosis such as brain cancer, and the importance of innovation in treatment. GammaTile is the first and only tile-based radiation therapy and is indicated as a treatment for patients with newly diagnosed cancerous brain tumors and patients with recurrent brain tumors. To learn more about GammaTile or to find a GammaTile Center of Excellence near you, visit gammatile.com. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us for this new season of the Game on Glio podcast. In this episode, we are sitting down with an amazing woman, an empowering woman who has been through quite a few bumps in her life's journey. And like those of us out there who have decided to take our pain and turn it into purpose, she has done just that. Kelci Jager is a certified life coach, a grief coach, a registered nurse, and the founder of Rise with Grief. She's also the author of the best-selling book, A Million Miracles and the One That Never Came. Kelci's life changed dramatically and forever when her 40-year-old husband, Colin, died from leukemia, leaving her to navigate grief as a young widow and a solo mom to their 4 boys. The journey has not been an easy one, but it inspired her to help others facing their own losses. With a mix of personal experience and professional know-how, Kelci is passionate about walking alongside others as they find their way through grief and towards healing. Kelci, thank you so much for being with us and joining us this season.
It's such an honor, Shannon. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. So Kelci and we met a couple of years ago through a mutual acquaintance, started talking a little bit here and there, started following each other's journeys, bonded a bit over our faith. She's really inspiring, and I knew that I needed to carve out space to have her come on and talk about how she helps others, how she coaches others while also still finding a way to navigate her own grief journey. The bumps that you face, the losses that you face, the trauma that you have faced extends beyond your husband. If we can, I would like to kind of back into what happened with Colin by starting with, you had another incident that took place, another traumatic event that took place with your son when he became sick. Can we talk about that a little bit? I want to paint a picture for everybody about this isn't one isolated thing. Sometimes life throws you multiple curveballs.
We lived in Southern California right before the pandemic. We relocated from Southern California to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
In Florida, we were navigating this new state across the country. We didn't know a whole lot of people because it was in the middle of COVID, but we did make some really strong connections. And our 2 oldest boys were out one night with friends, and they were in a motor vehicle accident.
Mm-hmm.
They were rushed to the emergency room. It was in the emergency room that we discovered that our 15-year-old son, Ian, had a brain tumor.
Wow.
So he had no symptoms whatsoever. He was one of 6 passengers in the vehicle, and he was the only one that had hit his head.
Oh my God.
Obviously, when you hit your head in an accident, they do a CT scan.
Yep, it's automatic.
You know, it's during COVID, so I was there alone with the 2 boys. Colin couldn't be with me. They only allowed one parent. Being a nurse, it just made sense for me to be the one that would be there. So he stayed back at home with our 2 younger sons. Luca, our other son that was in the accident, I could tell just by looking at him that he had multiple broken bones. He had road rash up and down his body. He had a lot of trauma. So I knew that he was going to have a long road. I wasn't sure about Ian, but I'm sitting there in the emergency room and the boys are both back in radiology.
Uh-huh.
And I texted one of the friends that we had made here in Florida, who was a radiologist at the children's hospital that my kids were at.
Mm-hmm.
I texted him, his name is Will, and I said, Will, I don't know if you're working tonight, but the boys were in an accident and they're getting scans right now. Do you have access to see what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
He texted me right away and said, I am at home, but I can't access from my house, so I'll get back to you.
Okay.
About 5 minutes later, he called me and I answered the phone. And he told me about Luca and said, yeah, he's got, this broken bone and this broken bone. He's going to need surgery, blah, blah, blah. Things that I was expecting. And then he said, has Ian ever had a scan of his head before?
Mm-hmm.
And the second he said that, my heart just dropped.
You just know.
I just knew the words that were coming after that. And I said, no, why? And he said, well, he has a 2-inch brain tumor in his right frontal lobe. Hearing the word tumor attached to your child is something I can't even describe. It felt like the ground disappeared beneath me.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a parent, you just go into this mode where you'll do anything to protect your child and to make them feel safe.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And I remember I called Colin and I was like, couldn't even get the words out. I was so hysterical. I was there alone in the emergency room, and then Ian came back in and he didn't know the ER doctor hadn't even come in and talked to us yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to put on this brave face. And then the ER doctor did come in and said, I know that you talked to Dr. Byerly, and he told me what was going to happen, the plan from there. I just put on this brave face for Ian. But the truth is, Shannon, is that Ian gave me courage. He was so brave. He was braver than me many times. And watching him face this battle and going into surgery, he had a bifrontal craniotomy.
Yep.
So he was cut from ear to ear, staples in his head, had to give up so many things for many months after that he recovered. And he never once complained. He went into surgery with a smile on his face. Watching him face it with courage gave us so much courage.
It's crazy to think that this was sitting there and he's the only one that hit his head, but the car accident and him hitting his head allowed the doctors to find this. And it just,
yes,
it's one of those kind of clarity moments where you're like, wow, is this some type of, like how the universe kind of wrapped around you guys? I mean, that's crazy.
100%. And I found this out about a month later. The boys had stopped at the neighborhood pool about 5 minutes before the accident. They were on their way home. They stopped at the neighborhood pool, and then they got back in the vehicle, and all 6 passengers went back to their original spots, except for Ian and his one other friend. They swapped spots. And I asked him, I said, why did you guys switch spots? And he said, I don't know. We just got in the car that way. The friend that was sitting where he was sitting, he was injured too, but he did not have any head injuries. He did not have a scan of his head. So had Ian gotten back in the car on that side, in that same spot, that same side, he probably wouldn't have had a head injury and we wouldn't have known. The neurosurgeon told me that the accident very likely saved his life.
So now he had the brain surgery. It was a tumor. Did it end up being benign or was it cancerous?
They didn't know. They said it looked like it was probably an astrocytoma, but they weren't 100% sure. And they didn't know what grade it was. And so they went in and did the surgery pretty immediately after the diagnosis. And then, comes that waiting game. That torturous, long waiting game.
Yeah.
I will never forget where I was when I got the call from, wasn't the neurosurgeon who called me. It was the oncologist who called me with the pathology results. I was at the gym and I could barely focus. I remember walking around like a zombie. It was like a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
I could barely focus, but I was there just like trying to maintain some sort of normalcy. I got the phone call and he said, Mrs. Jager, I am so relieved to tell you that your son's brain tumor is benign.
Wow.
And I just dropped to my knees in the middle of the gym and started just sobbing because the relief that came over me was so intense. And I remember some lady that I didn't know came over and sat on the ground next to me. And she was like, are you okay? And I was like, I am more than okay. I just found out my son doesn't have brain cancer. Thankfully, they were able to remove the entire tumor. So he did not have to go through any type of radiation or chemo. He did have major brain surgery. So he did have a lot of rehab and.
Oh, sure. Still recovery.
It's
still scarring that's happening in your brain because you're cutting into things.
Exactly. And he is still getting monitored because there is a chance that it can come back and it can come back as cancer. So he does get routine MRIs just to monitor for a possible reoccurrence.
Sure. So this takes place. You've got both your sons in this traumatic car accident. Luckily, both walk away, so to speak. Your son Ian goes through massive rehabilitation after finding a benign brain tumor, but you get this like massive wave of relief. And then comes the diagnosis with Colin.
Yeah. So the accident and the brain tumor, and Luca, my son that was also in the accident, he had multiple surgeries. He had a lot of trauma to his body, months and months of physical therapy, months and months and months dealing with intense pain. It was a very, very stressful, traumatic time.
Oh my God, yeah.
So fast forward to the end of 2020. We're coming to the end of 2020. I've never been so ready to put a year behind me. Let's bring on 2021. It's going to be so much better.
Yep.
On January 2nd of 2021, so we're 4 months after the accident, my husband ended up in the emergency room with chest pain and a fever. He was admitted to the hospital, and over the next week, he progressively got sicker and sicker, and the doctors were testing him for so many different things, and everything was coming up inconclusive, but his labs were all over the place, and he was in so much pain, and just nothing was making sense. A week after him being in the hospital, we discovered that he had acute lymphoblastic leukemia.
Oh, wow.
When the doctor called me, it was a Friday night around 9 p.m. She called me on the phone and gave me the diagnosis. I was at home. She had just talked to Colin on the phone, but he was alone at the hospital because of COVID visiting hours. They had kicked me out, and she didn't tell him because he was there alone. But she told me.
How old was he when he was diagnosed?
He was 39, previously completely healthy.
Wow.
I just had this wave of disbelief and denial and shock. Processing it was so hard. And I just couldn't wrap my mind around how this was happening to us, especially after we had just been through this extremely traumatic thing with
your sons.
Yeah. And I definitely had moments of why us? Like, why is this happening and how can this be happening? It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, those are intense questions. And it's so crazy how a moment like that, everything freezes. It is just the date, the time, the place, how you feel. Even though you kind of go numb, it's like one of those moments that will just, it's burned into your brain. It never goes away.
Yes.
Everything just becomes so still and frozen in that moment.
Exactly.
Yeah. He gets the diagnosis. And as a registered nurse, I mean, I can only imagine that you were probably already going through your head, okay, this is what I know about it. This is what's going to have to take place. This is what he's going to have to do. It's, the tail end of COVID, people are still trying to find some type of normalcy during that time. Both you and Colin are still kind of coming off of this trauma and grief from what two of your boys had gone through. How did you guys navigate? Because he only had, from start of diagnosis to his death, he only had, 18 months?
Yes. I look back at that time. Part of me is like, I don't know how I survived that. And then the other part of me is like, I know exactly how I survived it, which I'm sure you can relate to when you look back on your experience with your husband. It's just so surreal. So when Colin was diagnosed, he was given a 30% chance of surviving the first year. And the doctor gave us really clear expectations. He said, this leukemia is aggressive and the treatment is long and it's brutal. And this treatment can kill you.
Oh, yeah.
But if we do nothing, the leukemia will kill you within a few weeks.
Right.
And so I immediately went into problem solving mode. And I told Colin his only job was to focus on beating the cancer and I would handle everything else.
Yep.
And I did that.
Yep.
I handled everything else. We had our own business. I handled running that. I handled the boys. I handled his treatment. I was so involved with every single aspect of his care.
Well, that's the whole point, isn't it? I mean, that's the point of being a spouse and a primary caregiver, is that everybody walks that journey differently. But I'm the same as you. I mean, everything else falls away and you're like, nope, you focus on this. I got it. I've got
Yes.
everything. I will handle it.
Exactly. And having my medical background and being an RN, it was a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it was a blessing because I knew I could talk to the doctors on their level and I knew what was happening and I could anticipate potential problems and I would catch things that other people wouldn't catch.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a curse at the same time because I also knew too much.
Right.
And I knew, ignorance really is bliss. I kind of spiraled and tried to control everything, even the things that I couldn't control, which was not exactly a healthy way to be. But I got so much strength from watching Colin and how hard he tried to stay here with us.
Yeah.
And he is the kind of person who would always focus on what he could do, even when things felt impossible. And this mindset really shaped how we approached his illness. And we allowed ourselves to grieve the life that we thought we'd have, but also focused on finding gratitude for each day that we were given.
Yep.
And some days were harder than others, but we learned to take the good with the bad and to just take it moment by moment and to find hope in even the smallest things.
Honestly, I mean, what these journeys and these diagnoses teach you, if nothing else, they teach you that. I mean, so many people walk through this life and they're so forward focused and so focused on the future and mapping out a plan and knowing what to expect and where things are going. And we're all guilty of doing it because that's how you're raised. That's how you're brought up.
Yes.
You just go forward in life and you don't think about anything. And when people say you need to be present in the moment, in the here and now, you need to be intentional. You don't know exactly what that means. You can hear the gurus all day long. You can, listen to your yogis. You can do all those things and you're like, yeah, it sounds nice. It sounds nice. But when you get smacked with something like this, that is when you finally understand what that actually means to be present in the moment and to just enjoy all of the little things that each day can bring you.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes something like this to actually understand it.
Absolutely.
So the type of leukemia he had, it was more of an aggressive, and there's different forms of leukemia because there are some leukemias that are survivable and can go into remission. It sounds like his was really aggressive.
His was very aggressive. His type of leukemia is the most common type of leukemia in kids, and kids have a better prognosis than adults.
So how does an adult end up with a leukemia that's meant for kids?
It can show up in adults. It's just more common in children.
Wow.
But yeah, it's a very aggressive leukemia.
So he passed away in 2022 at 40 years old. So let's remember everybody that, this is young. We're talking about young death. It's not okay to be having to deal with such young aggressive disease that's taking the lives of people at such young ages. He dies and you're now a young widow who's got to take care of 4 boys, but you also have your son, Ian, who you're trying to be mindful of that, you don't want a recurrence or a pop-up of his tumor showing up.
Mm-hmm.
How did all of you find a way to navigate through that? Because that's a lot of, I feel like there's different levels of grief and loss. And when you have a singular loss, it's profound. When you have multiple losses, because I've had to navigate multiple losses outside of Mike.
Yes.
And it's hard to take a breath sometimes because every time one comes up, that grief is re-triggered and then I get scared and I'm like, oh my God. Okay, so who else is next? Okay, who else is next? Who's going to drop off now? Is this coming for me? How did you navigate through that?
At first, I didn't know how I was going to survive, honestly. I didn't know how I was ever going to be able to move forward. But I knew that I had to figure it out. And I didn't know how I was going to figure it out. I just had a belief that I would be able to. And that was enough for me to be able to take the first step. I was consumed by grief while still trying to be present for our 4 sons. And like you said, Ian was still being monitored for his own health and a possible brain tumor reoccurrence.
Mm-hmm.
It was so overwhelming, to say the least. But really what got me through was taking my husband's lead through his journey and focusing on what I could do. I couldn't control what had already happened.
Yep.
But I could control how I showed up for my boys, even if I wasn't perfect.
And I'm sure that your boys, I mean, obviously they gave you a tremendous amount of motivation to find a way forward, because you're not only doing it for yourself and for Colin, you're doing it for them.
Absolutely. I had to make space for my own grief, which wasn't easy, in order to be there for my boys the way that I wanted to be. Allowing myself to grieve and also showing them my grief.
Mm-hmm.
I was showing them and demonstrating that it was okay to do the same.
Mm.
And slowly we started to find a new rhythm, one that honored Colin, but also allowed us to keep living.
So when you started your coaching practice, when you started getting into grief coaching, do you feel that that helped you heal as you were turning around and trying to help others?
Absolutely. Coaching has been a huge part of my healing journey. It's not just about helping others, but it's also been a way for me to channel my pain into something meaningful. There's something incredibly healing about holding space for others and witnessing their resilience. And coaching has also taught me to extend that same compassion to myself. I mean, I am a perfectionist and I am my own worst critic. And I have learned to acknowledge my emotions without judgment and to keep finding ways to grow and heal. And also writing my book, A Million Miracles and the One That Never Came, has also been very instrumental in my healing. And I won't sugarcoat it. The process of writing that was so brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Reliving those experiences and the worst days of my life was excruciating. And I questioned every time I would sit down to write, I would question why I was putting myself through that pain.
Yeah, I'm navigating that.
But in hindsight, it was profoundly healing because writing allowed me to process those emotions in a safe and intentional way using the tools that I've learned along the way. And I even would coach myself through those moments, reminding myself to breathe, to feel the feelings and to take it one step at a time. And now that I'm on the other side of it, when I was writing it, people would be like, oh, I bet it's so therapeutic and cathartic. I'd be like, no, it's not. It's torture. It's horrible. Yeah. It's horrible. But now on the other side of it, I can see that it really has been so instrumental in my healing.
So speaking of, I mean, we're talking about, therapeutic skills and tools in your toolkit. And, for others who are experiencing multiple loss and traumas, significant loss, what tools, give us 2 tools or 3 tools that not only have you learned, but that you've used in your coaching to help others that they might be able to harness or tap into to help them navigate such loss?
Well, that's a good question. I would suggest for others to really shorten their lens. It's very overwhelming and it's very easy to look into the future and be like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this. You don't just lose, the person, you lose your future hopes and dreams and plans and everything. And so it's so overwhelming and it's easy to feel like you're drowning in it,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have to heal all at once. You don't have to know all the steps to take. You just focus on the next right thing for you, whether that's getting out of bed, whether that's taking a deep breath or talking to someone who understands. Just focus on the very next thing.
Mhm.
And then I'd also say to give yourself permission to grieve in your own way and in your own time. There's no roadmap for this. And comparing your journey to others, it just adds unnecessary pressure, expectations, and pain. You really need to find what helps you, whether that's journaling, therapy, meditation, prayer, or even just taking a moment to allow yourself to feel without judgment is so important.
So now I want to zero in on that one a little bit, because there are different forms of trauma. There are different levels of grief and anxiety. You say to grieve in your own time, in your own way. But I want to stress, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the importance is to at least find a way to grieve in some way or form, no matter how long it takes. Because I do know people who, they bury the grief, they go on and just move on with life, and they have trouble communicating and feeling vulnerable to the grief, and then they shut down.
Oh, yeah.
Then the anxiety comes up, and because they haven't figured out a way to allow their heart and themselves to be vulnerable to what they've experienced, they just bury it. Let's tap into that. I mean, the importance of finding a way forward and taking that next right step is to at least, even if you're by yourself, cry, write, scream out loud to nobody in the room. I mean, just every once in a while, whatever it is, whatever form it takes, something that allows you to get it out.
Absolutely. That's why I say to give yourself permission to grieve, because our tendency is to push it down, to push it aside, to run away from it because it hurts, it's painful. And so, of course, our instinct is to run away from the pain. But what you run from chases you, and you can't outrun your grief. The only way through it is through it.
Yeah.
You have to walk right into the storm. And that doesn't mean that you have to sit in it all the time. In fact, I would advise you not to do that, to not sit in it all the time, but to allow yourself to open that grief box and explore it, and I tell my clients to imagine pulling up a chair and inviting grief to sit next to you in that chair. Allow it to be with you, and invite it in is not easy, but it's so essential, because when we do that with time, our nervous system calms down and realizes that the grief isn't this big scary monster like we think it is.
It can actually teach you.
Absolutely. And the grief, it hurts because the other side of the coin is love.
Yeah.
And so without the love, there wouldn't be the pain of grief.
Yeah. If you don't want to feel anything, then you may never experience grief. But then you're also missing out on the most valuable, important lesson in life, which is to feel deeply, to have relationships and partnerships and community and empathy and sympathy and love, and to nourish the heart and the soul. And you can't have one without the other. They coexist.
Exactly. To live a full human experience, we have to allow the full spectrum of emotions.
Yeah. Now, with that, when we go through traumatic events like this, triggers form. And with those triggers, as somebody who used to be in the social work field, triggers are very powerful. If you don't understand what a trigger is and how to identify it, it can create a lot of panic and anxiety when it happens. Talk to us a little bit about how to navigate triggers, and, how do you navigate triggers when so many unexpected things can pop up in life?
This is a good question. I was actually just talking to a friend about this very thing this morning, because 1 week after Colin died, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. 2 months after that, my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer. And then a few months after that, my mother-in-law was diagnosed. I just felt like I was just surrounded by all these horrible things. I was just like, what is happening? What is going on? And I would be lying if I said that I still don't live in that place of anxiety of what bad thing is waiting for me around the corner, because it pops up. I am human and I do have those fears because of my experiences, but I can't live in that place. It's not sustainable, and it will steal your joy and your peace. When those fears pop up, I have learned to coach myself through the experience with compassion and understanding.
How do you do that? Give us a technique.
So what's helped me is to learn to anchor myself in the present. So I remind myself that the fear that I have is about the future. It's not in the now. And so when I feel this trigger coming on, I pause and I ask, what is true in this moment? And most of the time, the answer is that, my loved ones are here and we're okay and safe and everything's okay in the moment. And I also have to acknowledge the trigger. So I can't just push it away. I can't just shame myself or be like, oh, come on. Why are you doing this? This is ridiculous. I will say to myself, of course you're feeling this way. Of course this fear is here. I normalize it. It makes sense that you feel this way, that you have this fear, given what you've been through. I talk to myself with compassion and I remove all judgment. And then I remind myself that I don't have to live in that fear. And then the last thing that I do is once I go through those steps is I will focus on gratitude. I try to intentionally notice the good things, the simple joys, the love around me. My default, since my husband died, my default is to be miserable.
Yeah.
I have to be intentional to find the joy. And so I don't go through my days being miserable. I go through my days feeling so much joy and happiness and light, but it takes work. I have to be intentional at doing that. And that gratitude doesn't erase the anxiety completely, but it shifts my perspective to helps me feel less consumed by the fear of what might happen.
It's good that you bring this up because for me, I meditate, sometimes not every day. I do find time every morning to just be still and to sit for at least 20 minutes quietly. But there's many mornings that I'll meditate to intentionally ground myself in the present moment and to give myself positive affirmations to think about and to kind of put into my head. I always tell people there's a difference between anxiety and fear. Anxiety is that feeling that we get of things that could happen but haven't happened. And fear is essentially fearing the next thing because something has already happened and we recognize what that is. I had something very similar happen where after the miscarriages and the loss of the adoption, when Mike died, I lost our dog within the year after that. And he was the first dog we had gotten together when we moved in together. So he was kind of the anchor, like the last big anchor to the life that I had with Mike.
Yes.
But then a friend of mine, his mother, who I was very close to, who was at the funeral, who was kind of a guardian angel, who was a support, somebody that Mike and I had been very close to, had died suddenly that year. A colleague and a friend of mine and Mike's died 2 weeks after he did, which I was not expecting. Then a year and a half after that, so in 22, my husband's best friend, his wife died from cancer.
Oh, gosh.
My mother was then diagnosed with breast cancer, which is thankfully in remission, and she is doing fabulously. But I've got 2 other friends who are battling cancer right now. And then I lost a very dear friend of mine of over 30 years to stomach cancer, who was only in her early 50s. And she just passed away last year. I've had many of those same moments where you feel like the sharks are circling.
Yes.
It brings up triggers. And for me, I can tell when those triggers, I can tell when it's coming up because for me, it's anxiety over fear. And it's that immediate fight or flight response, and my fingers start to get tingly. The top of my head for me, at the crown of the head gets very tingly for me, and my lips start to get really tingly, and I feel like my nose starts to feel weird, and I'm like, oh, okay. I feel like I want to pass out. Like, I'm just feeling very anxious. For me, I do a grounding technique where I count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
That puts me in the present moment. So it's putting myself, it's recognizing, like 5 things that I can hear, things that I can smell, things that I can touch, something that I can taste, like it puts me, where am I right now in this moment? And that tends to bring the anxiety down. And then I have to do exactly what you're saying. We have to be intentional and recognize what we're grateful for. It's really hard. It takes practice.
Yes.
For you, like you said, you tend to go to that darker place. That's just your natural instinct. For me, it's not so much going to that darker place, but for me, it's my brain just automatically wants to go to all the negative, all of the stuff that's bad that's happened. And I have to train my brain to say, okay, what do you have going on that's okay right now? You woke up this morning.
Yes.
You woke up, you're healthy. You have a roof over your head. You have a dog that's still healthy and alive. And it takes so much work to actually go to that place.
Yes.
And you have to do it. You have to be so intentional with it every day. But I do think too, especially for us, and everybody's different in their journey, but I know for you and I, faith really anchors us too.
Absolutely. So much so.
So how does that play into, how significant is that in how you have found your strength to get through? Because I've told people, like, there are times, even today, and I will be honest with this, I've always been a faithful individual. And I say faithful because even though I grew up Roman Catholic, the Bible was written by human beings. I know that there is a lot of interpretation in everything that we read, but I do believe in God. And there are times when my faith feels like it's as small as the size of a mustard seed. But that's all you need.
Yes.
You just have to find a way to hold on to that faith and that hope that you will come out on the other side of this. And lately, my practice has been to thank God for the answers I have yet to receive.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful.
And that takes a lot of practice, but I'm doing it every day.
Yes.
Every day.
that would take a lot of faith to be able to do that.
Yeah.
For me, faith is such an anchor, and it's what's carried me through some of my darkest moments. Before all of this happened, and also during this whole crazy, chaotic time in my life, it gives me hope when I feel like there is no hope, when I feel like everything is falling apart.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's always easy. It doesn't mean that everything's going to work out perfectly. There definitely have been times, especially after Colin's diagnosis and after he passed, that I had moments where I questioned everything that I thought I believed to be true about God and his love for me and his love for our family. And I really wrestled with the why of it all and wondered if God was listening or if he even cared about me. Because if he cared about me, why would he let this happen?
Yeah.
What I've learned, though, is that, and to your point, that all you need is the size of the grain of a mustard seed, is our faith doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful.
Yep.
It's okay to have doubts.
Yeah.
It's okay to ask the hard questions. And for me, faith isn't about having all the answers, because quite honestly, if God himself came down and told me why my husband wasn't allowed to stay earthside with me and our 4 sons, I don't know that I would be satisfied with the answer.
Right? Yeah. Would any answer be good enough?
I don't think it would be good enough. It's just about trusting in something bigger than myself.
Yep.
Even when I don't understand the plan.
And that's powerful. Again, it goes back to, while we don't understand the plan and we don't have to have all the answers, reminding ourselves what we're grateful for. And so I would love to kind of end on give us 3 things that you are grateful for. What are 3 things that you are grateful for here and now today?
Oh, this is so good because gratitude is such a grounding practice.
It really is. Yeah.
So today I am grateful for the love of my family. My boys are my heart. And even though life looks different than I ever wanted it to or expected it to, the bond that we share is everything to me. They have saved my life in so many different ways. The second thing I'm grateful for is the opportunity to help others through my coaching. Turning my pain into purpose has been so meaningful, and I'm so grateful for the chance to walk with others on their grief journey and to provide the guidance that I so desperately needed when I was going through it and I couldn't find it. And so to be able to be that guide and to take their hand and to help them walk and see the light in the darkness is just, I'm so passionate about it. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I have that people trust me in their hardest moments.
Wow, I love that.
And the third thing is the little joys in life. Just the little things. I love a good sunrise, a good sunset, the sound of the ocean, even just going outside and feeling the warm sunshine on my skin. I have learned to treasure just the small little things that remind me that life is still so great.
Life is very precious. It's those little things that make life worthwhile, even when we're going through really hard things. It's a good reminder to all of us. And I love so much that you shared your journey with us, your pain with us, the healing process that you're still going through. It's a reminder to all of us that we're all still going through healing in some way, shape, or form. And hopefully these are things that will help others and support others so that they know that they're not alone. Where can everybody find you? If somebody wanted to reach out to you for coaching, or if they wanted to find your book, where can people look you up?
So I have a website, risewithgrief.com. All of my information is on there. You can sign up to receive my grief newsletter. I have a free grief video that you can get access to. You can access my book there. I also am on social media on Instagram at Rise with Grief, and I am on Facebook under my first name, Kelci Jager.
Perfect. Kelci, thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability and for sharing your story and your strength and your hope. And, for everybody out there listening, feel free to reach out. You can find her book on her website. You can also find it on Amazon, I'm pretty sure, correct?
Yes, correct.
So, thank you all for listening. And for everybody that's out there, we will be right back.
Plus Therapeutics, a clinical stage pharmaceutical company, is developing an innovative treatment for central nervous system cancers, including recurrent glioblastoma and leptomeningeal metastases. Rayobec, a clinical stage radiotherapeutic, is designed to deliver effective, targeted radiation doses directly to cancer cells while sparing healthy tissue, offering hope for improved outcomes and quality of life. The NIH-supported RESPECT GBM Phase 2 clinical trial for patients with recurrent glioblastoma is currently recruiting. Learn more about this and other trials at respect-trials.com and plustherapeutics.com. Plus Therapeutics. Power and precision in radiotherapeutics.
My quick recipe for you today is homemade mac and cheese. I'm sure many of you probably have other recipes that you use, or many of you get the organic mac and cheese from the grocery store. But what I found in doing that, even the flavor packet or the cheese packet can be processed. So what I started doing shortly after Mike died was I tried to make recipes for myself that were just really simple, that didn't take a lot of time, where I didn't have to do a ton of prep, that I could make for myself, some of it comfort food, like mac and cheese, some of it a little healthier, but not a ton of time to make the food. So for today's recipe, homemade mac and cheese, I like to use unsweetened almond milk. You can use whatever variation you want. However, I have found that Elmhurst milked makes the healthiest version of almond milk, oat milk, walnut milk, all different kinds. So if you don't have a nut allergy, oat milk or almond milk is the best way to go, unsweetened, because it's less sugar. I found that some of the other containers of different almond milks and soy milks, because of the plastic containers, they have higher plastics in them. So I've been steering clear of that and using recycled cartons. Elmhurst milked is the best for me. So you can use that. If you need to use soy, if there's a nut allergy, you can absolutely do that as well. So I use unsweetened almond milk. I use elbow pasta. There's also the garbanzo bean version, which is like a pasta that's not pasta. So if you need to or want to steer clear of carbs, you can do a chickpea pasta, which is just as delicious and it doesn't break down. So I get elbows. I cook those regularly. I save a ladle full of the pasta water, and I'll tell you why. Once the pasta has cooked, you're then going to drain it out except for the one ladleful. Put it back in the pot. Add the ladleful of the pasta water. Then add your unsweetened almond or oat milk or whatever you'd like to use in place of dairy. Then you're going to add butter. And I use the Land O'Lakes olive oil and sea salt because it's healthier. It's a healthier version for me. So I add probably 2 or 3 tablespoons of that butter with the almond milk. I start mixing all of that together. The pasta water is in there. And then I add Havarti cheese. So it's an aged, semi-hard cheese that I love. You can also do Parmesan and Pecorino. You can combine Parmesan and Pecorino, or you can just do Pecorino cheese. And if you have a lactose intolerance issue, what I found is the hard aged cheeses like Pecorino and Parmigiano age the lactose out. So they tend to be naturally lactose free, which I don't think many people know. So you can use that, but I absolutely love Havarti cheese. And I do have a slight sensitivity to lactose, so I take a lactate pill, but Havarti I found does not bother me when I get the aged version of it. And I add about 1.5 cups of that. I shred it right into the pasta. Mix it all together. I add a little bit of salt and pepper just because for some reason it adds some great flavor, and then you enjoy. So that is my quick, easy recipe for you guys today. And we will put this up on the website as well. You've been listening to the Game on Glio podcast, the podcast that is designed to educate, advocate, and tell the real stories of those walking the journey of brain cancers such as glioblastoma and grief and loss. Like what you hear? Share us with others. Follow us on Instagram at Game on Glio Podcast, Facebook at Game on Glio, or visit our website or YouTube channel. You can find us anywhere podcasts are played.